The Galactic Council chamber was alive with noise. Voices echoed across the massive hall. Different tones, different languages, all blending into one restless sound. The chamber was built in perfect circles, rising layer by layer like a giant arena. Each level was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. Tall species, small ones, some covered in scales, others in shining armor or flowing robes. At the very center stood a single platform, and on that platform stood one human. He looked small compared to the scale of the room. No guards, no advanced armor, no glowing weapons. Just a simple dark uniform and a calm face. His name was not important to them. To the council, he was just the human. A low wave of laughter spread across the chamber. It started from one corner, soft chuckles. Then it grew louder. Soon, entire sections of the council were smiling, whispering, even openly laughing. Earth had sent a representative. A single representative. Some thought it was a joke. Others thought it was an insult. High above, seated in the largest chair, the council leader watched everything. His eyes were sharp, his expression unreadable. When he raised his hand, the noise slowly faded. Silence returned, but the amusement remained. The leader leaned forward slightly. "So," he said, his voice deep and echoing across the chamber, "this is the representative of Earth." A few quiet laughs slipped through again. The human did not react. He stood still, hands behind his back, eyes forward. "Calm. Too calm." The leader continued, "Your world has requested entry into the Galactic Alliance." A pause. Then, with a faint hint of mockery, he added, "But from what we see, your species lacks the strength, technology, and influence required." Murmurs of agreement followed. One tall alien with silver skin leaned toward another and whispered, "They barely control their own system." Another replied, "I heard their world is unstable." A third added, "Primitive." More quiet laughter. The human remained silent, watching, listening, waiting. The leader spoke again, louder this time. "Tell us, human, why should we even consider your request?" All eyes turned to him. Hundreds of species. Hundreds of judgments. The human slowly lifted his head. For the first time, he moved. His eyes scanned the chamber, not with fear, not with anger, but with something else. Understanding. He took a small breath. But instead of answering directly, he said something unexpected. "Before I answer, I would like to ask a question." The chamber reacted instantly. Confusion. Surprise. A few annoyed voices rose. "You are not here to ask questions," one delegate snapped. Another said, "Answer what you were asked." But the council leader raised his hand again. Silence. He studied the human carefully. Then he said, "You may ask your question." The human nodded once. Simple, respectful. Then he spoke. "What is your planetary classification system?" The question hung in the air. For a moment, no one answered. It was such a simple question, yet completely unexpected. Finally, an elder representative from a long-lived species leaned forward. "We classify worlds based on environmental stability and survivability," the elder said. "Peaceful worlds, moderate worlds, hostile worlds, and extreme hazard zones." The human listened carefully. Then he nodded. "And," he said slowly, "what do you call a world where survival itself is a constant struggle?" The chamber grew quieter. Some aliens shifted in their seats. The elder frowned slightly. "That would fall under extreme hazard classification." The human tilted his head slightly. "And what do you call a world," he continued, his voice still calm, "where the land fights you, the oceans hunt you, and even the air can kill you?" Now the silence deepened. No one laughed. No one whispered. The question felt different. Heavy. The council leader narrowed his eyes. "That would be," he paused for a brief moment, "a death world." The word echoed. Death world. It carried weight, danger, finality. The human nodded once more. Then, for the first time since he arrived, a faint expression crossed his face. Not a smile, not pride. Something quieter, something certain. He looked directly at the council leader. then at the rest of the chamber. And he spoke. Then I believe you already understand my answer. A ripple moved through the council. Confusion turned into unease. What is he implying? One voice whispered. Another said, No, that's not possible. The leader leaned forward again, his voice no longer mocking. Explain yourself, human. The human took a step forward. Just one. But in that massive chamber, it felt like a shift in gravity. When you look at Earth, he said, you see a small world.
Pause.
You see limited technology. Another pause. You see weakness. The words were simple.
Direct.
No anger. No emotion. But then his tone changed just slightly. You are not wrong. A few aliens relaxed. Some even smiled again. But the human continued. You are just incomplete. The smiles faded. Behind him, the massive display screen flickered to life. At first, it showed Earth from space.
Blue.
Beautiful. Peaceful. Some in the chamber nodded. Yes, one whispered. Harmless. Then the image changed.
Storms.
Massive hurricanes swirling across oceans. Lightning tearing through dark skies. Volcanoes erupting with fire and ash. The chamber grew quiet again. The human's voice continued. This is our home. The images kept changing. Deep oceans filled with unseen creatures. Dense forests hiding predators. Endless deserts where nothing survived for long. Freezing lands covered in ice. Every part of our world tests us, he said. More images. Animals hunting. Creatures fighting. Survival everywhere. The human looked up at them all. We are born into this. Silence. No laughter now. Only attention. Full attention. And for the first time, the council was no longer looking down at the human. They were watching him.
Carefully.
Because something had changed. Not in the room. Not in the chamber. But in their understanding. The laughter was gone. And something else was beginning to take its place. Something unfamiliar. Something uncomfortable.
Doubt.
The human stood alone in the center. Still calm. Still steady. But now no one was smiling. And the real conversation had just begun. The chamber remained silent. Not the kind of silence filled with boredom or disinterest, but a heavy silence. The kind that slowly pressed down on every mind in the room. The human stood at the center, unmoving. Behind him, the massive display still showed images of Earth. Storms raging, oceans crashing, lightning tearing through the sky. No one laughed now. Not a single voice. The council leader leaned forward, his sharp eyes fixed on the human. You are suggesting, he said slowly, that your world falls under the classification of a death world. The word felt heavier this time. It no longer sounded like a distant concept. Now, it was personal. The human nodded once. Yes. A ripple of whispers spread across the chamber. That cannot be true, one delegate said. Impossible, another added. Species from death worlds do not reach space, a third voice argued. The human did not interrupt.
He let them speak.
He let the doubt grow. Then, when the noise settled again, he spoke calmly. You believe a death world species cannot reach the stars, he said, because such worlds are too dangerous, too unstable. He paused, then added, You are correct. For a moment, confusion returned. Some aliens exchanged looks. Then what are you trying to prove? One of them asked. The human looked at him directly. That you misunderstand what survival means. The chamber fell quiet again. Behind him, the display changed. Now it showed a violent storm, massive waves crashing into land, winds tearing apart everything in their path. This, the human said, is a normal storm on Earth. A few delegates leaned forward. Normal? The image shifted. A volcano erupted, sending rivers of fire down its sides. This happens naturally. Another shift. A desert stretched endlessly under a burning sun. Temperatures rising to deadly levels. Some parts of our world cannot support life for long. Then, a frozen wasteland appeared. Endless ice. Blinding white. And some parts try to freeze us to death. The human's voice remained steady. Simple.
Clear.
No part of our world is safe forever. The chamber felt colder. Even those who had laughed before now watched in silence. A tall insect-like delegate raised a claw. If your world is truly like this, it said, how did your species survive long enough to evolve? The question was sharp.
Direct.
Important. The human answered without hesitation. We didn't survive because the world was kind. He paused. We survived because we adapted. The word echoed again. Adapted. The display changed once more. Now it showed early humans' primitive tools, fire, small groups struggling to live. We were weak, the human admitted. Slow. No natural weapons. A few aliens nodded. That made sense. But then, we learned. The images shifted. Tools became better. Fire became controlled. Shelters appeared. Weapons formed. We learned how to survive the cold. A scene of humans wrapped in furs. We learned how to survive the heat. Humans crossing deserts. We learned how to survive predators.
Traps. Spears.
Strategy. The human looked around the chamber. We did not wait for our world to become safe.
Pause.
We made ourselves stronger. Silence. Deep silence. The council members were no longer relaxed. They were focused, listening carefully, trying to understand. A reptilian delegate leaned forward, its eyes narrow. But adaptation takes time, it said. Your species should have been wiped out before reaching this level. The human nodded. Many times we almost were. That answer surprised them. He continued. We faced extinction more than once. Images appeared, disease, war, famine. Our own mistakes nearly destroyed us. The chamber shifted uneasily. Then how are you still here? Another voice asked. The human's gaze hardened slightly. Because we don't give up. Simple.
Direct.
But powerful. We fight, he said. We rebuild. We learn from failure. The images changed again. Cities rising. Technology growing. Machines flying. Spacecraft launching. We turn our weaknesses into strength. A pause. Then, he added something that made several delegates tense. And we do it faster than most species. That caught attention. Fast adaptation was rare. Dangerous. Unpredictable. The council leader tapped his armrest slowly. His expression was no longer amused. It was thoughtful. Careful. You are describing a species that thrives in chaos, he said. The human nodded. Yes. Another pause. And you expect us to believe that such a species seeks peaceful alliance? The question carried doubt, suspicion. The chamber waited. The human did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked around, at every face, every species. Then he spoke quietly. We did not say we are peaceful. That sentence hit the room like a shockwave. Several delegates shifted in alarm. Whispers spread again. Faster this time. Did you hear that? He admits it. Dangerous. But the human raised his hand slightly, not in threat, but in calm control. We are not peaceful by nature, he continued. We are capable of peace. Silence returned. The difference mattered. It mattered a lot. We understand conflict, he said. We understand fear.
Pause.
We understand survival. The chamber listened closely, because now this was no longer a simple request for alliance. This was something else. Something deeper. The human stepped slightly to the side as the display showed one final image. Earth. From space. Beautiful. Fragile. But now different. Because they understood what was hidden beneath that beauty. The human's voice softened. This is our home. Then a final line. Calm but impossible to ignore. And everything on it tried to kill us. No one laughed. No one moved. No one even whispered. Because now, the truth was clear. Earth was not a weak world. It was not a peaceful world. It was not an easy world. It was a test. A constant, endless test. And the species standing before them had passed it. The council leader slowly leaned back in his chair. For the first time since the meeting began, he was not judging the human. He was thinking. Carefully. Because something had changed. The human was no longer just a representative. He was a warning. And the council was starting to understand. The silence did not break this time. It stretched across the chamber, deep and heavy, like something unseen had settled over every delegate present. The human stood at the center, calm as before. But now the room had changed. No one looked at him with amusement anymore. Now they looked with questions, with caution, and for some, with the first signs of concern. The council leader leaned forward again, his voice slower now, more careful. "You have explained your world," he said. "But a dangerous environment alone does not make a species powerful." A few delegates nodded. "Yes," one added. "Many worlds are hostile, yet their species remain primitive." Another spoke. "Survival is not the same as dominance." The human listened. Then he gave a small nod. "You are right," he said. That answer surprised them again. He continued, "Humans are not the strongest species." Murmurs began. "We are not the fastest." A few relaxed slightly. "We are not the most durable." Now some leaned back in their seats, reassured. The human did not rush his words. He let them settle. Then he said quietly, "But we are the most persistent." The word echoed in the chamber. Persistent. The display behind him shifted again. Now it showed something different. Not destruction. Not danger. But effort. A human climbing a steep mountain, slipping, falling, then climbing again. Another image. A machine failing, sparks flying, then being rebuilt. Another. A group of humans lost in a frozen wasteland, still moving forward. "We fail," the human said.
Pause.
"We fail often." Another pause. "But we continue." The chamber grew still again. A thin, tall delegate with glowing eyes spoke carefully. "Many species continue. That is not unique." The human turned slightly toward him. "Yes," he said. "But most species stop when survival becomes too costly." That line made several delegates shift. The human's voice stayed calm. "Humans do not." The images changed again.
War. Fire.
Chaos. Cities damaged, then rebuilt. "We push forward," he said, "even when logic says we should stop." A low murmur spread. "That is not intelligence," one delegate said. "That is recklessness." The human nodded again. "Yes." That answer came too easily. It made them uneasy. "Sometimes it is," he admitted. Then his tone shifted slightly. "But sometimes it is the reason we survive." The display flickered. Now it showed early human explorers crossing unknown lands. Sailors facing endless oceans. Astronauts leaving Earth for the first time. "We explore," the human said. "Not because it is safe."
Pause.
"But because it is there." The chamber absorbed the words. A mechanical-sounding delegate asked, "And this persistence, it allowed you to leave your world?" The human looked at the display of space behind him. "Yes." He stepped slightly forward. "When our oceans were too dangerous, we crossed them." Images. Ships battling storms. "When our land was too harsh, we built cities." Images. Massive human structures. "When our skies were unreachable, a rocket launched into space. We reached them anyway." The chamber remained silent. But the feeling had changed again. Now, it wasn't just unease. It was realization. The council leader spoke again, slower than before. "You are describing a species that ignores limits." The human turned toward him. "Yes." The answer came, without hesitation. "That is concerning," the leader added. The human gave a faint nod. "It should be." That response sent a ripple through the chamber. Several delegates began whispering again, this time not in mockery, but in concern. "Unpredictable. Dangerous mindset. Hard to control." The human let them speak. Then he raised his voice just slightly, not loud, but enough to regain attention. "You see unpredictability as a weakness," he said. "We see it as survival." The display changed once more. Now it showed something simple. A human child.
Small.
Fragile. Learning to walk.
Falling.
Standing again. Falling again.
Standing again.
The human's voice softened. "This is how we begin." The chamber watched quietly. "We learn by failure."
Pause.
"We grow by struggle." Another pause. And we improve because we must. The child in the image finally walked forward. Stable, balanced, moving. The human looked back at the council. This never changes. A long silence followed.
Then,
A heavily armored delegate stood up suddenly. Its voice was sharp. If what you say is true, then your species should have destroyed itself long ago. The chamber tensed. That was not a question. It was an accusation. The human looked directly at the delegate. For the first time, there was a slight intensity in his eyes.
"We almost did," he said.
The room froze. No one expected that answer. He continued. More than once. Images flashed quickly.
War.
Explosions. Destruction on a massive scale. The chamber grew colder again. But we are still here. The human's voice returned to calm. We learned. The armored delegate did not sit down. Or you were lucky, it argued. The human shook his head slowly.
No.
A pause. Luck runs out. Another pause. Adaptation does not. Silence. Deep silence. The kind that made every word feel heavier. The council leader studied the human carefully. You are not presenting your species as superior, he said. No, the human replied. Then what are you presenting? The leader asked. The human took a small breath, then answered in the simplest way possible. Of reality. The word settled across the chamber.
Clear.
Unavoidable. We are not the strongest, he repeated. We are not the fastest. We are not the smartest. Each line landed slowly. But we endure. That word stayed.
Endure.
The display behind him faded to black. No more images. No more visuals. Just the human. Standing alone. In silence. And now, no one in the chamber saw him as weak. No one saw him as small. Because they finally understood something important. Strength was not just power. It was not speed. It was not size. Sometimes, strength was the ability to keep going when everything else should have ended you. The council leader leaned back slowly. His fingers tapped lightly against his chair. His expression was no longer skeptical. It was thoughtful, careful, because now the situation had changed again. The human was no longer just explaining his world. He was revealing his species. And the more he spoke, the more dangerous that species began to sound. The chamber remained completely silent, waiting, watching, because they all knew one thing now. This human was not finished, and whatever came next might change everything. The silence did not last forever. It never does. In a chamber filled with power, pride, and ancient civilizations, silence always breaks. And when it did, it came sharply. A tall, heavily armored delegate rose from his seat. His metallic armor reflected the chamber lights, and his voice carried a tone of clear irritation. Enough words, he said. His gaze locked onto the human. You speak of endurance, adaptation, survival. But these are just claims. A few others nodded in agreement. Yes, another voice added. Any species can describe itself in such a way. The tension in the chamber began to shift. Not toward laughter, but toward challenge. The armored delegate took a step forward from his platform. If your species is truly what you claim, he said, then prove it. The word echoed. Prove it. All eyes turned back to the human. This was different now. This was no longer discussion. This was a test. The human stood still for a moment. Then he nodded. Very well, he said simply. No anger. No hesitation. Just acceptance. That alone made some delegates uneasy. The human reached into his uniform slowly. Several guards around the chamber tensed, their weapons activating with soft hums. But he only pulled out a small device. Simple. Compact. He placed it on the platform in front of him. What is that? Someone asked. A record, the human replied. The device activated with a soft glow. Immediately, the massive display behind him came back to life. But this time it showed something very different. A battlefield. Dark skies. Broken terrain. Strange, towering creatures moved across the land. Massive, fast, and clearly dangerous. A murmur spread through the chamber. That is not your world, one delegate said. No, the human replied. It is not. The creatures on the screen attacked something off camera.
Fast.
Violent. Efficient. Then, humans appeared. Small in comparison. Fragile-looking. Outnumbered. Outmatched. The chamber leaned forward, watching closely. The humans didn't run. They didn't hesitate. They moved.
Fast.
Coordinated. One group distracted the creatures. Another flanked from the side. Traps were set. Weapons were used, not advanced, not elegant, but effective. The creatures fell, one by one. The chamber grew quiet again. This is a simulation? A delegate asked. The human shook his head.
No.
That answer hit harder than expected. This was an early off-world encounter, he explained, before we fully understood what we would face beyond our system. The video continued. Another wave of creatures attacked. More aggressive this time. The humans adjusted. They changed tactics. Improved. Adapted. The chamber watched in complete silence. No one interrupted, because now they were not listening. They were learning. A smaller delegate whispered, "They are not stronger." Another replied, "But they are winning." That was the part that mattered. The humans were not dominating through power. They were surviving through strategy, through persistence, through something harder to predict. The armored delegate who had demanded proof crossed his arms. "This proves nothing," he said. "Any trained unit can fight." The human nodded. "You're correct," he said. Then he added something that changed everything. These were not soldiers. The chamber froze. "What?" someone asked. The human continued calmly. "They were civilians." The word spread through the room like a shockwave. Explorers. Engineers. Researchers. The video paused. A close view of one human appeared. Injured, exhausted, but still standing. Still fighting. Still thinking. Still adapting. The human representative spoke again. "We do not wait for ideal conditions."
Pause.
"We do not wait for perfect preparation." Another pause. "When we face the unknown, we learn while surviving it." The chamber felt different now. Heavier. Sharper. The council leader leaned forward again, his eyes focused intensely on the screen. "You are saying," he said slowly, "that even your non-military individuals are capable of this level of response?" The human met his gaze. Yes. That single word carried weight. A long silence followed. Then, the display changed again. Now it showed a different scenario. A damaged human ship drifting in space. Life support failing. Systems offline. The crew moved quickly. Repairing. Reworking. Using limited tools. Improvising. "They should not survive this," one delegate whispered. But the humans kept working. Piece by piece. Fix by fix. Until the ship powered back on. Engines reignited. It moved. Alive again. The chamber was completely silent. The human turned back toward them. "This is who we are." No pride. No arrogance. Just truth. "We endure." The armored delegate slowly lowered his arms. For the first time, he had no immediate response. Because this was no longer theory. This was evidence. And it was difficult to ignore. A different delegate spoke up, its voice quieter now. "If your species is capable of adapting to such extreme conditions." It hesitated, then finished. "Then you are unpredictable." The human nodded. Yes. The chamber shifted again. Unpredictable was not a comforting word. It meant risk. It meant uncertainty. It meant potential danger. The council leader stood slowly from his seat. The movement alone commanded attention. All eyes turned to him. He looked at the human, not with mockery, not with doubt, but with something else. Recognition. "You have shown us your resilience," the leader said.
Pause.
"You have shown us your adaptability." Another pause. "But there is one question that remains." The chamber held its breath. The leader's voice lowered slightly. More serious than before. "Why come here?" The human looked around the chamber one more time. At every species. At every face that had once laughed. Then he answered. "We came because we are not alone anymore." A quiet statement, but powerful. "We know what is out there."
Pause.
"And we chose not to face it alone." The chamber listened carefully, because now this was no longer about proving strength. This was about intention, and intention could change everything. The human took one final step forward.
His voice steady, clear,
controlled. We are not here to threaten you. A pause. We are here to stand with you. Silence filled the chamber again, but it was no longer empty. It was full of thought, full of realization.
because something had changed.
Not just how they saw humans, but how they understood them. The laughter from before felt distant now, almost unreal, because in its place, something far more serious had arrived. Respect, mixed with caution, mixed with something they did not like to admit.
Fear.
And the council knew this meeting was no longer under their control. The chamber did not return to normal. Even after the human finished speaking, something remained in the air, something heavy, something difficult to ignore. The council was no longer united in opinion. Before, they had laughed together. Now, they whispered separately. Quiet conversations spread across the tiers. Low voices, careful words, concerned tones. They are too adaptable. We cannot predict them. A species like this cannot be trusted easily. The human stood still at the center, hearing everything, reacting to nothing. He did not interrupt. He did not defend. He simply waited. Above them all, the council leader remained silent for a long moment, watching the chamber divide. That alone was unusual. The council was rarely uncertain. But now, they were. Finally, one delegate stood. A tall being with dark, layered skin and glowing eyes. Its voice was calm, but there was tension beneath it. If everything you say is true, it began, then your species is not just resilient. It paused. You are dangerous. The word echoed clearly. No one argued against it.
Not this time.
The human lifted his gaze slightly.
Yes, he said.
The chamber shifted again. Some expected denial. Some expected defense. But not agreement. That made it worse. Another delegate stood quickly, this one smaller but more aggressive. Then why should we allow you into the alliance? It demanded. Why bring a dangerous species closer to our worlds? A murmur of agreement followed. Yes. Too much risk. They could become a threat. The human let the noise rise, then fall. Then he answered. Because you are already at risk. Silence. Instant.
Sharp.
The words cut through the chamber. The aggressive delegate narrowed its eyes. Explain. The human turned slightly, looking toward the massive display behind him. With a simple gesture, it activated again. But this time, there were no storms, no predators, no battles. Instead, a map of the galaxy appeared.
Wide. Complex.
Filled with marked systems and known territories. This, the human said, is what you know. The council watched. Then, new markers appeared. Faint at first, then clearer, expanding slowly across the map. The chamber leaned forward. What is this? Someone asked. The human's voice lowered slightly. This is what you don't. A ripple of unease spread instantly. The council leader's eyes sharpened. Unknown systems? He asked. The human shook his head.
No.
A pause. Unknown threats. The chamber went completely still. One delegate spoke quietly. You are making a serious claim. The human nodded. Yes. Another delegate leaned forward. Do you have proof? The human did not answer right away. Instead, the display zoomed in on a specific region of space.
Dark.
Uncharted. A faint signal appeared. Then, it vanished. Static filled the screen for a brief moment. Then another signal appeared. Stronger. Closer. What is this? The council leader asked, his voice now fully serious. The human replied calmly. These are distress signals. Silence. From who? Someone asked. The human looked directly at them. Species that no longer exist. The chamber froze. No movement. No sound. The weight of those words was immediate. Heavy.
Real.
The human continued. We have detected patterns.
Pause.
Civilizations expanding. Another pause. Then disappearing. The display showed it clearly. Growing territories. Then sudden emptiness. No debris. No warning.
Just gone.
A delegate whispered, "This is impossible." Another said, "We would have known." The human shook his head. "No," he said. "You wouldn't." That answer unsettled them more than anything else. "Because you are not looking for it," he added. The chamber felt colder. The council leader stood fully now. His presence filled the room. "And you are?" he asked. The human met his gaze. "Yes." A pause. "Because we had to be." The display changed again. Now it showed a damaged human outpost. Scorch marks. Destroyed structures. Signs of struggle. "You encountered this threat," the leader said.
It was not a question.
The human nodded once. "Yes." Another silence. "What happened?" someone asked quietly. The human's expression did not change. "We survived." That answer sent a visible reaction through the chamber. Some leaned back. Others looked at each other with concern. "Barely," the human added. That single word carried everything else. The cost. The danger. The reality. The council leader spoke again, slower now. "And you came here to warn us?" The human shook his head slightly.
No.
The chamber tensed. "Then why?" the leader asked. The human took a small breath. Then answered clearly. "To prepare you." That was worse. Much worse. Because a warning could be ignored. Preparation meant something was coming. The aggressive delegate spoke again, but its voice was no longer confident. "You expect us to believe that a species like yours, a death world species, is offering help?" The human turned toward it. "Yes."
A pause.
"Because we understand what happens if you don't." The chamber absorbed that slowly, painfully. The human stepped forward slightly. "You see us as dangerous," he said. "That is correct. No denial. No argument. But we are also the kind of species you want beside you."
Pause.
"When something worse arrives." The silence that followed was deeper than anything before. Because now, this was no longer about humans. This was about something bigger. Something unknown. Something possibly unstoppable. The council was no longer deciding whether humans were worthy. They were beginning to ask a different question. Do we need them? The council leader closed his eyes for a brief moment. Thinking. Calculating. Then he opened them again. And for the first time since the meeting began, there was no pride in his voice. No superiority. Only caution. Only awareness. "You have changed the nature of this discussion," he said slowly. The human nodded. That was necessary. The chamber remained completely silent. No whispers. No arguments. Because now, every delegate understood one simple truth. They had laughed at Earth. They had dismissed humanity. They had seen them as small. But now, they were no longer laughing. Because the human standing before them was not asking for acceptance. He was offering something far more dangerous. A chance to survive what was coming. No one spoke. The chamber, once filled with laughter and pride, now felt completely different. The air was heavy, almost still, as if even sound itself was waiting. The map of the galaxy remained glowing behind the human. Bright systems. Dark empty spaces. And those silent markers slowly expanding. No one could ignore it anymore. The council leader remained standing. His eyes moved from the display to the human and then across the chamber. For the first time, he was not controlling the room. The room was thinking for itself. Slowly. Carefully. And that made everything more serious. A senior delegate, one who had been silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke. Its voice was old, steady, and filled with experience. "If what you are saying is true," it began, "then this threat does not belong to one species."
It paused.
"It belongs to all of us." The human nodded. "Yes." That answer settled deeply, because it confirmed something none of them wanted to admit. They were not as secure as they believed. Another delegate spoke, quieter this time. "And you are certain this is not isolated?" The human turned slightly toward the display. With a small movement of his hand, more data appeared. Signals. Patterns. Disappearance points. All evidence suggests expansion, he said. The chamber remained silent. But we do not yet understand it fully, he added. That honesty mattered. It made his words harder to reject. The council leader stepped down from his platform. That alone caused a shift. Leaders did not step down lightly. But now, he walked slowly toward the center of the chamber, toward the human. Each step echoed softly. Every eye followed him. When he reached the central platform, he stopped just a few steps away from the human representative. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply looked at each other. Two different species. Two very different worlds. Standing at the same level. The leader finally broke the silence. You came here knowing how we would react, he said. It was not a question. The human nodded. Yes. You expected laughter. Yes. You expected rejection. Yes. The leader studied him carefully. And yet you still came. The human's answer was simple. We didn't have a choice. That line carried more weight than anything before. The leader's eyes narrowed slightly. Explain. The human took a slow breath. Then he spoke, not to challenge, not to prove, but to make them understand. On Earth, he said, we learned something very early.
Pause.
When a threat grows, ignoring it does not make it disappear. The chamber listened closely. You can delay, he continued. You can deny. Another pause. But eventually it reaches you. The words settled deeply, because they were not just logic. They were experience. The human looked around the chamber. At every delegate. Every species. You have built strong systems, he said. You have created advanced technology.
Pause.
You have known stability for a long time. Another pause. But that stability has made you comfortable. That word, comfortable, caused a reaction. Some shifted in their seats. Others frowned. The human did not stop. And comfort, he said quietly, can be dangerous. Silence. No one argued, because deep down they understood. The council leader crossed his arms slowly. You are asking us to act on uncertainty, he said. The human shook his head.
No.
A pause. I am asking you to prepare for reality. That difference mattered. A lot. The leader looked back at the display, the disappearing systems, the expanding unknown. Then back at the human. And what role does your species play in this? He asked. The human answered without hesitation. We face it. Simple.
Direct.
No hesitation. And if it cannot be stopped? Another delegate asked quietly. The human's expression did not change. Then we slow it. Another pause. And if it cannot be slowed? This time, the human held their gaze a little longer. Then we survive it. Those words sent a quiet chill across the chamber. Because now they truly understood what humanity represented. Not power, not dominance, but endurance against the impossible. The council leader exhaled slowly, a rare sign of weight on his mind. He turned away from the human and looked at the rest of the chamber. Hundreds of species, hundreds of decisions, all waiting. He raised his hand. This time, the silence that followed was immediate and complete. The discussion has changed, he said. No one disagreed. This is no longer about admission into the alliance.
Pause.
This is about survival. The word echoed through the chamber.
Clear.
Unavoidable. The leader lowered his hand slowly. Then, in a movement no one expected, he turned back toward the human
And bowed his head slightly. It was not a deep bow.
Not submission, but respect. Real respect. The chamber reacted instantly. Whispers.
Shock.
Disbelief. The council leader did not bow to outsiders. Ever. Yet he had. The human did not react with pride. He simply nodded once, acknowledging it. Nothing more. The leader straightened again. Earth will not be judged as a lesser world, he said firmly.
Pause.
It will be recognized as a necessary ally. That statement changed everything. The chamber shifted again, but this time not with fear, with acceptance.
Slow.
Careful, but real. The human took one final step back. His role was done. But before he turned to leave, he spoke one last time. His voice calm.
Steady. Clear.
We did not come here to be feared.
Pause.
We came here so you would not face this alone. The chamber remained silent, because now there was nothing left to argue, nothing left to deny. The truth had already done its work. The human turned and began to walk away from the center platform. No guard stopped him. No voices called out. Every eye followed him, not with mockery, not with doubt, but with something completely different: understanding. And as he reached the edge of the chamber, one final thought settled into every mind present. They had laughed at Earth. They had seen humanity as small, insignificant,
Weak. But now,
they knew the truth. Earth was not just another world. It was a proving ground, a place where survival was earned every single day. And the species born from it was not something to laugh at. It was something to stand beside. Because in the darkness that was coming, there was only one kind of ally that truly mattered. One that would never stop fighting.